Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Ignore the hair. I don't know what's going on there. But breaking Canucks news as of a handful of minutes ago. Canucks making a trade. They like to be the first people to make trades in this league, this current management group of Alvin and Rutherford. But the trade that we have coming our way is Lukas Reichel from the Chicago Blackhawks in return for a 2027 fourth round draft pick. Now, let's take a look at who Lukas Reichel is so that you have an idea. I didn't have a great idea before the 10-15 minutes of research I've just done, but he is a German young winger born in May 2002. He was a first round pick back in the 2020 draft. Now, that's a draft that had some question marks around it, obviously, because there was less scouting being done during the 2019-20 season. There's a lot of junior leagues, in this case, German league, were shortened. But we can see that he went drafted by Chicago. He got ice time in the 2021-22 season as a rookie, and he's sort of been bouncing in between, right? We see 2022-23 here, 15 points in 23 games, showing a bit of that offensive upside, -8, but Chicago's been a bad team. Also split that time with 55 games in the AHL, had 51 points. So producing as really like a 20-year-old in the American Hockey League. And then the following year, splits his time mostly in Chicago, a little bit of time in the AHL. Again, just under a point per game in the AHL, 16 points in 65 games. So he went from 15 points in 23 to 16 and 65, a clear step back. But again, Chicago was still a bad team. Last year, spent the entire year at the NHL level, just 22 points in 70 games. So he kind of reminds me of like a Niels Höglander style of progression, right? A really hot sort of start out of the gate, guy who might have a lot of offensive upside, but is just sort of soured within the organization. This sort of comes off the heels of an article that Quadrelli posted this morning, saying that the Canucks were still in the mix on Reichel. Hopefully a trade happens soon. Well, 2.5 hours later, they got their wish. Now, the big thing to keep in mind here, of course, is he's a winger, not a center. The Canucks need centers, but they don't really need center depth, right? They've got Ratu, they've got Bluger, they've got, Niels Oman. They've got guys who can play down the lineup. For the center side of things, with the way Pettersson's playing and all this stuff, the Canucks need high-end centers, and that's not what you're getting for a fourth-round pick. So they go out and get a winger because, again, the depth chart is a little up in the air, and more offensive upside can always be a good thing. Little summary for him: offensive winger, good hockey sense, very good skating, good skills, good effort, top six upside, not overly flashy, but very efficient. And this was his scouting profile, I think, so from a few years back. But this is sort of the note from this summer, from someone who's clearly watched him play more than I have, sort of in that tricky in-between phase. Too good for the AHL, trying to establish himself as in the NHL. And size-wise, what was he, 6'170", so he's pretty lean, fairly small, up and down through the lineup. So he's trying to find a place, and the Canucks are hoping that they can sort of get a lottery ticket on him. Now here's where my concern sort of lies with Reichel, and that's just looking at things like possession. This is off Hockey Reference here. We can see, looking at something like Corsi, for example, which shows essentially shot attempts while this player's on the ice. And if we look at last year, or really every year of his career, but the sort of 2 full years where he played 65 and 70 games, Corsi percentage of 41% and 41%. So while he is on the ice, they get 41% of the shot attempts, which is less than 50, which is therefore not good. Now, there's a couple things to keep in mind, right? Well, if you play for a bad team, you can sort of get hindered by those metrics, but that is where this relative Corsi for comes from, where it compares you to while you're not on the ice, and he's been negative every year of his career, with this year being the worst so far. Now, small sample size, 49 minutes of ice time, 37.5% Corsi for, 10% worse than the rest of his team. So that's, and on the Fenwick side, which is slightly different. I don't remember the exact way Fenwick, it's shots and misses compared to shots, blocks, and misses. So this gets rid of blocks, which I guess they theorize is bad attempts. Again, 37%. So sort of in that same ballpark, well worse than the rest of his team. The most concerning part of that to me, and this is all at even strength, mind you, is these numbers right here. This is at even strength how often his shifts start with faceoffs in the offensive zone compared to faceoffs when they're in the defensive zone. You can see the first 3 years or last 2 sort of full years of his career, pretty 50-50. They were deploying him sort of in all situations. This year, 68% of his starts, and again, this is in 5 games, so it's small sample size, but 68% of his shifts started with a face-off in the offensive zone compared to 32 starting in the defensive zone. Obviously, this doesn't count like changes on the fly. This doesn't count face-offs at center ice or offsides, but it's still a metric of deployment. And we're seeing that he gets deployed more in the offensive zone, which makes sense. He's an offensive winger who's young, but the results have not been good. But again, he plays for a bad team, and he's sort of all over the lineup. Let's get into, so really what I'm trying to say by that is there's upside, but he's clearly not gotten the trust of his team, and they were ready to move on from him for pretty cheap. He is on a 2-year contract. He's in the final year of that contract. So he's a pending restricted free agent. So he's not an unrestricted free agent. He's too young for that. $1.2 million cap hit. That's so close to league minimum. If you send someone down to the AHL, you get, I think, $1 million of relief. So having him in the lineup costs $200K more than having like an Archdeep Baines in the lineup, for example, at least from a strictly salary cap perspective, not taking into account real dollars, because that's not really our problem. That's the Aquilini's problem. So yeah, he'll be an RFA, 24 years old. He'll have a couple more years of RFA eligibility. He can't be a UFA until the 2029 off season. So he has all of 26, 27, 27, 28, 28, 29. So 3 more years after this one of RFA rights. So he can't go anywhere. The Canucks can re-sign him, or they can trade his rights off if they want to. 2 more things I want to talk about here on Lukas Reichel. Number 1 is the value of the pick. 4th round picks, not super valuable, right? Now, Puckpedia has this fun thing. I don't know why the top bar is all messed up here, but they have this fun thing where it shows the value of your pick. And this is based off of the Perry pick value, Matt Perry, who used to be the Coyotes director of hockey analytics. Essentially, it has a value between picks 1 and 5, 6 to 16, 17 to 32 for round 1. Round 2, I think they're all about the same, just because the farther down you get, the less impactful they are. So a first round pick is, whoops, I lost it there. First round pick has a score of 31, right? So that's what a first round pick is worth. And that number means nothing to me, but we can use it as a reference, because a 4th round pick, as you can see here, and as you can see here on that pick that was traded, it's a value of about 1. So it's 1/30th the value of a first round pick, which means it's the most likely guy that you're going to get drafted in the 4th round who actually makes the NHL is a player who is, playing 4th line that you can get for free in free agency anyways. So the potential loss here is very minimal, to the actual future of the hockey club. You can see these 4th round picks are getting moved around. Canucks, used it for, or got it. Sorry, they got a 4th for the Mikheyev trade. They traded a 4th, they got another 4th in the Shilovs trade, and they just traded one of them away, which was their own pick here, in this Lukas Reichel deal. So they still have 2 4th round picks in the 2027 draft. Of course, they don't have a 2nd, which is, obviously 5 to 6x the value of a 4th. But either way, getting into the weeds here. Most importantly, where does he go? Where does he go in this lineup? Let's zoom in so I can get that advertisement off the screen there. Where does Reichel fit in? Well, we know he's a left winger. He shoots left. He's always played left wing. So he's a left winger. The whole lineup is in flux, right? You had Pettersson with Kane and Garland last night. You had Sasson playing second line center, basically with DeBrusk and Besser, and he looked all right. You have Bluger on IR as of today. We don't know when Heedle's coming back. But really, if we just look at the wings, right, we know these guys all like playing the right side. These guys all like playing the left side. So the obvious substitute here is probably a Baines or Drew O'Connor. Drew O'Connor hasn't particularly impressed me so far this season. Baines is a lot cheaper. I don't know what they're planning to do here, but if he's slotting in with like Ratu and Sherwood or something, or when Bluger comes back, maybe it's Bluger and Carlson. You can have a guy who can, maybe get some power play time because the power play looked really bad yesterday. And maybe add a little bit of scoring down the lineup, but we'll see. Honestly, this is a trade that adds a player and you don't lose much, and it could help the team in the long run. So it's a shot, right? It's kind of Daniel Sprongy And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, you lost a 4th-round pick next offseason, which is pretty low value. All right, that's all I got. Lukas Reichel. We'll see him probably during this homestand. I'll talk to you guys later.